Chairperson Julia Botel.
Here. Here.
Chairperson Douglas Lawson.
Here.
Councilperson Chodrick McCoy.
Here.
Councilperson Kashambo Miller Anderson.
Present.
Councilperson Shirley Lanier. City Manager John Evans.
Present.
City Clerk Claudine Anthony is present. City Attorney Don Nguyen.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilwoman Miller Anderson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Evans? Your way.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the City Council. The intent behind this presentation is to kick off the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. In order to kind of set the stage as to how we got to this point, I want to share some of the work that staff has embarked upon as we prepared for this year's budget. As you can envision, this year's budget process was quite challenging with COVID-19. And what a lot of folks have started to realize is that the economic conditions in municipalities as well as the nation is predicated on multiple factors. The city of Riviera Beach collects 60% of its revenue from ad valorem or property tax revenue, and 40% of the revenue is collected by other sources. And so when we show you the budget today, you'll see that there are different elements that make the budget what it is. And we are heavily reliant upon revenue that's provided by the state and other sources. So in order to get us to this point today, we assembled a budget reasonableness committee. That committee was comprised of staff that had representatives from the city attorney's office, procurement, finance, HR, city administration, and public safety. The intent behind that budget reasonableness committee was to ask questions about budget proposals, budget requests, and to ensure that if there was anything that was happening in a department and had a global impact on other departments, that there were probing questions that were asked. Additionally, looking at it from the standpoint to provide guidance, perspective, and insight to city administration as we bring forward this budget for your consideration. As we looked at the state of the organization and the state of the city, originally when we went into the budget process, we projected a $4.2 million budget shortfall. Fortunately for us, the revenues came in better than anticipated as it relates to the state side. The city of Riviera Beach collects about $47 million in revenue from ad valorem revenue, and then the other funding sources make up the $81 million general fund. The general fund is the city's largest fund. When we looked at developing a budget to bring it to the board, we knew the board was very conscientious about cost increase and what would that be if there was any cost increase in the overall budget. The budget is about 4.69% larger than last year's budget, but there's a couple of elements that will be discussed in subsequent budget conversations that speak to some of the things that we had to do. We have cuts in spending, we have additional revenues, and then we have operational efficiencies. Two things that are incorporated into this budget is the city moving forward with a fire assessment, as well as a 6% utility district increase. And we did have preliminary conversations with the board about the fire assessment last year, as well as earlier this year, about moving forward with a fire assessment. We'll get into the specificities of the fire assessment and the intent behind the fire assessment. One of the things that you'll see as part of the presentation that was glaring to us is that the residential properties in the city of Riviera Beach a large portion of those properties, well over 43 to 45%, are non-homesteaded properties. And 85% of those properties are owned by non-Riviera Beach residents. 15% of your residential housing stock is homesteaded properties. So that number has increased since 2017, when that number was well around 70%. So one of the challenges that we have to look at is, how do we transition our community into people that are owner occupied? Because that is going to have a profound impact as we try to address some of the challenges in our community. This budget is built on the millage rate of 8.452 mills. And we do have a model that, in the event that the board wanted to consider reducing the millage rate to 8.2 mills, what that will actually be and what cuts would have to occur. But one of the things that I will share with you is that if we look to move in that particular fashion, the biggest benefactor of moving the millage rate to that will be FPL. FPL would save $240,000 in 1 year if that millage rate goes down to 8.2 mills, where the average Riviera Beach resident would save $3.16 per month. So by giving that reduced millage rate, in fact, your larger property taxpayers would see an increase associated, or a windfall in their case, as it relates to that particular item. We've also, of course, as stipulated in the charter, 1.5% of your ad valorem revenue goes to your major disaster fund, which is about $750,000. And that fund is very healthy, and Mr. Sherman will provide you some insight with regards to that fund. But any growth that the city of Riviera Beach experiences is sometimes scraped off the top as it relates to property tax value. The property appraisers has told us that next year, flat is the new up, because some of the challenges that we're seeing is that the residential market, but also the commercial market, is not as hot as it used to be. And a lot of businesses that were currently up and operational are probably going to retrench their operation, maybe downsize, and see how they operate post-COVID. So everything that we have done is with the backdrop of how COVID will impact our ability to operate as a government entity. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen at this point and jump into the nuances of the presentation.
Madam Chair, Mr. Evans, the numbers that you threw out, we went pretty quickly. Are you going to go over those in this presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so everyone should be able to see the presentation. And so I gave you a general oversight of the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. The roadmap, we'll go over a financial overview. We'll look at the tax base. We'll look at the overall budget. We'll look at the preliminary 2021 budget. We'll then go to some of the major initiatives that the board adopted with your Riviera Beach 2030 plan, some city goals, and then moving into the budget calendar and question and answers for the board. But this is the beginning of the process and how we'll move through today's agenda. So the first item is unassigned fund balance as it relates to the general fund. And like I said earlier, the general fund is the city of Riviera Beach's largest fund. Your general fund revenue is $75.6 million, and the Riviera Beach has $20 million of unassigned fund balance. So that is monies that is not set aside for any particular project or initiative. It is basically cash on hand. When we talk about the general fund, we've talked about what GFOA gives recommendations to local government entities. That's Government Finance Officers Association. That particular industry or entity is the gold standard as it relates to providing insight for good budgeting and good fiscal management. The award that the city's been successful in receiving over the last 2 years is provided by GFOA. And GFOA says that they want government entities to at least have no less than 2 to 3 months of general fund operating revenue, which for the city is approximately 16.67%. When we talk about our general fund, our unassigned fund balance, and we look at the city of Riviera Beach, we're at 27%. So staff, when we did have the discussion about how do we look to transition our entire community, because obviously the CRA can only operate within their particular geographical boundaries. The city, we can go throughout our entire community. Can we look to bring some of that cash on hand to effectuate what we want to see occur, to assist with getting folks into homes? Can we assist with property acquisition? Can we assist with construction? This would be the monies that we would look to utilize in the event that we were to move into creating that opportunity that the city of Riviera Beach has been staunch advocates for, is transitioning our community to more owner-occupied dwellings. And so this is something that, as we have subsequent conversations and subsequent discussions, we want to be conscientious of the threshold. And as a coastal community, we probably want to stay around that 20%. Coastal communities usually carry a higher fund balance because of the volatility and the concern associated with, if anything happens, those, and we will not refer to them by name, but the things that circle in the ocean around this time of year. So we're very conscientious about those things, but we need to make sure that our fund balance stays at a good percentage, because at any particular time, we as a city, as a coastal community, have to be more resilient than others that are more inland.
Madam Chair. Mr. Evans, do we have this PowerPoint?
I'm looking.
You do not have this PowerPoint, but I can email it to you.
Okay, yes, thank you.
So, okay, I will have someone from staff. Ms. Reynolds, if you can email that to Ms. Noel so she can get it out to the board. Thank you. So going into the next slide, here talks about cash on hand and the days of cash on hand. So the city of Riviera Beach approximately has cash in the bank for about 122 days. And so that's your fund balance when it transitions to what cash on hand means. And you can look at other municipalities throughout Palm Beach County, as well as some other communities. You see the city of Clearwater and some other entities. So it all depends on what their particular agency and how resilient they want to be as a community. Moving on to the next slide. This slide is very important because it talks about the city's general fund adopted budget and the FTEs and our staffing numbers. And so you can see that the general fund budget in 2020 was 24 million, to where in 2020 it was, or in 2000 it was 24 million, and in 2020 it is 77.4 million. And you can see that the numbers as it relates to personnel have fluctuated as the revenue and the revenue for the city has increased or decreased over time. So one of the things that we're looking at holistically in the agency is, as we do get vacancies in the city of Riviera Beach, that we're going to be asking those questions. Is it necessary to fill that position? Can those duties and responsibilities be absorbed by someone else in another department? And or is that function, or is that responsibility truly a responsibility we as a city should be focusing on? And so we're going to look at our peer agencies. We're going to look at our service delivery model, because the level of service and what services we provide, local governments provide two types of services: those that are mandated by state and federal agencies, and those that are requested by constituents. Constituents at one time said, we want to have recreational amenities, or we wanted to have a police department or a fire department, and those types of things. There's no law that says that you have to have that, but it is a core function of municipal entities. And we said a long time ago that these were the services and the programs that were valued to us. So as we go through, you will see over the next couple of years, we will be looking at that number and really scrutinizing positions as they become vacant, and looking to maybe modify the staffing complement. And what I mean by that is, we rather have a smaller, better compensated workforce than a large, poorly compensated workforce. And so as we look to address that, one of the things that the deputy city manager is going to be looking at is the compensation and classification study, and looking to bring that back for consideration. And this budget includes addressing some of those inequities in the compensation and classification system, to really push on how do we attract, retain, and compensate the city's most precious resource, its employees.
Question, Mr. Evans, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So clarify, I thought just a moment ago, I heard you say the general fund is 75.6, and I'm looking at 77.4. Am I not following correctly?
This is for 2020. The 2021 budget is 81 million.
Okay, well, I didn't hear that word at all.
Yeah.
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 But in any event, that's still a discrepancy, because I heard 75.6 million shortly ago.
We have 74 in 2019, and as far as in the general fund.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So we're looking at $81 million for 2021.
Yes, sir. And that's
Okay.
with a 4.69% increase.
Okay. And obviously this spreadsheet or this presentation slide doesn't account for the FTEs. Do we have an estimate of what you're looking to bring as far as that numbers that go down?
Yes, sir. The proposed FTEs and the information that we'll be sharing in subsequent budget discussions is the FTE count is reduced about 20%. We did go through vacancies. We did look at certain positions. So the number that you see for 2020, the number that staff is proposing for 2021 is a lower staffing complement. All right. Moving on to the next slide, which speaks to the tax base. We can see that in 1999, the taxable value of our entire community was $1.5 billion. Now in 2020, it's $5.9 billion. So we have seen increase in our taxable value of approximately 295% since 1999 to 2020. If you see, though, in these years that go back to 2000 to 2004, the millage rate was at its highest point, and that was at about 8.998 mils. And then as the economic downturn and issues started impacting the city, especially during the Great Recession, you saw that the millage rate remained the same and then was reduced in 2015 and stays at the millage rate, that 8.4 mils and change that we have been utilizing for some time now. One of the things that, as you look at the linear chart, you can see that the recession we know impacted us in 2008, but the city of Riviera Beach really didn't start feeling the pinch until 2009, all the way to 2015, because the way in which we collect our revenue in arrears. So what happens is, for instance, individuals say the MRIT, when the MRIT project comes online. Well, if the MRIT project is not CO'd by December 31st, they basically don't jump on the tax roll until the following year. So if the MRIT doesn't CO by December, just to utilize that particular project, we won't start collecting revenue from that particular project until 2022. So when the economy gets a cold, we get a profoundly different version of the flu years later, and it takes us longer to recover and rebound. All right. Moving on to the next slide. So since 2012 to 2020,
Mr. Rhodes, if I could interrupt,
Yes.
just to let the record show that Councilwoman Linear has joined us. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you.
No problem. So if we look at from 2012 to 2020, there's been significant changes to the agency and things that have been a priority for the city. Obviously, I can't speak to all of these items. And then I had a 15-month vacation during 2017. So I'm going to have to defer to staff to be able to fill in some of the gaps on those. We have increased compensation for personnel. We have invested in information technology systems, and kudos to this board for dealing with the challenge that you had with regards to the computer system, and then making sure that the appropriate resources have been allocated since then to ensure that we are now closer to the 21st century than we've ever been as it relates to our computing devices. Mr. Sherman, if you can speak on the ERP system as well as public safety and the improvements on the Marina District, et cetera.
Yes, certainly. Good evening, everyone. This is Sherman, City Finance Director. The ERP system, in 2015, the city undertook an IT master plan. And they came in, they spent about close to a year evaluating all of the city's technology issues. Obviously, at the top of the list, there were two things that really came out at the very top. One was the computer-aided dispatch for the police department. That was actually the first project that we implemented. The second project was a replacement for the ERP system that the city had purchased back with Y2K. So again, that system has certainly had outlived its usefulness to the city. So the city has funded since 2015 what we're calling the IT master plan. It is a long 7-year plan. So in essence, we're about entering in our 5th year of the plan to bring everything in the city up to current standards. The Marina District is obviously not only the uplands and then the water side, but everything that you see on the uplands that we did in conjunction with the CRA. So while the CRA certainly put substantial dollars into the uplands and paid pretty much for the event center, the city did provide over $10 million of funding to that project, primarily to the infrastructure and the again, the shoreline, the promenade and those issues. Which other item did you want me to hit on?
Business tax.
Oh, yes, we haven't, the business tax receipts, you're allowed to increase the business tax receipts up to 5% every other year. We have not taken advantage of that the last number of years. I want to say the last time we actually had an increase was in 2015. So again, we've managed to hold those rates down. And even when we did do the increase in 2015, we did not do the full 5% that was permissible. The other item on here that the manager touched on real quick is the major disaster fund. Today, that major disaster fund sits at $6.3 million. But just to give you an idea of where that is, in 2018, it was at 4.5 million. Last year, it went up to 5.3. Now it's at 6.3. So again, that's kind of the focus. So we have to keep putting that 1.5% in that fund, which then limits what we can use those dollars for.
Okay. Obviously, and then Mr. Sherman, if you can speak on the actions that the board took to fully fund the pension plans for general fire and PD, and I'll take the rest.
Sure. The pension plans, the city had 3 pension plans, one for the general employees, one for the PBA, police department employees, and one for the firefighters. All 3 plans were woefully funded back in 2013, 2014. Part of it was an impact of the recession, which provided losses to the funds. But the contribution rates that therein lied, that got applied to the city, were approaching between 40 and 50% of the salary of the members of each of those plans. So what the city did back in 2015 is we moved the general fund employees and the firefighters, so the IFF, to the Florida retirement system. We then went out and we borrowed what's called pension obligation bonds, which is a taxable borrowing, and we fully funded the pension plans. So we borrowed the rate at about 3.5%, where the pension plans charge us 7.5%. So the difference between the interest rates that we're paying on the bonds versus the interest rate that the pension plan would pay us for that unfunded liability, and the difference between the FRS contribution rates and the city's contribution rates required under the old plans, the projection is that the city would actually save $130 million over a 20-year period. Now that obviously is dependent on how you hire and what salary levels. But at the time when we had the analysis, we got an independent actuarial report. And, or when we made the presentation, so we had that support. But we were looking at $130 million over 20 years. And add that what part of that deal is that the city would take those savings and put it into the salaries of the employees, understanding that we had some of the lowest paid employees in the county. That was part of the reasoning for changing retirement plans, generating the savings, and then putting it into wages.
With regards to the other items, the city of Riviera Beach was able to successfully create departments that were once housed under finance and general administration. Procurement, IT, library, and human resources were departments that were created. We've also looked to enhance public safety, and we've done that by some of the apparatus that has been secured for fire, as well as the real-time crime center, shot spotter, some of the other elements, body-worn cameras, have been significant investments in public safety for the city of Riviera Beach. You'll also see that when we look at the revenue that's collected from ad valorem taxes, that 79% of the revenue that's collected conceivably goes to fund public safety. So your 2 major core municipal departments consume most of the ad valorem revenue that the city of Riviera Beach collects. Again, we talked a little bit about the transfer to the major disaster fund. And I did ask the question of the insurance provider, in a worst case scenario, what would be the maximum out of pocket that the city of Riviera Beach would experience if we had a storm like a Hurricane Dorian? And that number was roughly about $3 million. So that fund is a very healthy fund, and it is separate and apart from your general fund reserves, your non-assigned reserves that we've spoken about earlier. Mr. Sherman, if you can get into the improvements of the city's financial standings and ability to borrow capital.
Yeah, part of that goes back to what we see as the cash on hand and the fund balance. As you might imagine, coming out of the recession, cash on hand was probably closer to 1 month versus 4 months. Fund balance was in the low teens at that point. And again, if you recall, that was coming off of storms like Francis and Wilma and Jean. So there was a lot of concerns about the level of fund balance. So over the last 7-8 years, as we've been able to build up the cash reserves, build up the fund balance, provide balanced budgets, take steps again like the pension obligation bonds, all of those have been recognized by the rating agencies as movements forward. The city is AA rated now. City hadn't prior to 2014 actually done any borrowings for over a dozen years. So getting back into the market, and getting the rating agencies familiar with the city again, where it stands, where it sits in the county, the role that it plays within the county. Building a good management team, I think, has been critical and been recognized by the rating agencies. And while we've been doing that, we not only took care of the general fund, but also building up the utility district, building up stormwater, as we've issued debt for both of those entities as well. Again, the rating agencies have taken note of the city and recognized the gem that we really have here.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. And as we had said earlier in the presentation about the millage rate, that has been decreased from 8.998 to 8.4520 mils. And obviously, we know that it is the desire for this board, and it is the desire of city administration to effectively get to a point where we have diversified revenue streams, that we are in a better state with regards to our facilities, so we can look to move the millage rate down and save the residents of this community monies as it relates to ad valorem taxes. But I can tell you that when we get into the other revenue streams and you see the assessments that are being generated, some of those communities that we compare ourselves to do have artificially low millage rates because they have created another funding stream to pay for public safety. So,
Mr. Evans, I have a question. Going back to the general disaster fund, as I recall, if we were to make any adjustments to the amount of money that we put into that, we would have to open a charter.
that is correct.
And could we have a workshop at some time in the future about whether or not we think that the charter should be opened and what kinds of things we would ask the charter review committee if either we reconstitute it or we institute a new one, those kinds of issues that we would like to see it review?
Certainly. Right. The next slide.
Before we go too far, because there's a number of things I want to get some clarification on.
Go ahead,
So-
Mr. McCoy.
So this slide right here just begs a number of different other questions, but before I address what I see on this slide and what was discussed, I think I certainly respect what it is that the Charter Review Committee has done. However, that's something that doesn't necessarily have to go to the Charter Review Committee. I think it's our desire as elected officials for us to refocus our savings account for major disaster fund. I mean, that's as simple as us putting an ordinance together and have 2 readings, and then it can be then reduced to ballot language as opposed to constituting a charter review committee, because I think that that's going to be a process in itself, and having people to serve has been, a bit challenging. But Mr. Evans, there's a number of things that I want to kind of ask questions about before we get too far away from some of the things that you've discussed, and particularly this slide. So obviously it's been a desire of us to kind of at least be conscientious of the millage rate. However, I believe you said 40%, is it about 40% of our general fund revenue comes from ad valorem taxes, or was it 60%?
60%.
I'm sorry.
60% is from property tax revenue.
Okay, all right. So I had it the other way around. So in that event, then obviously, in light of this slide, then these are some of the things that obviously, I think these are some of the highlights. But Mr. Sherman spoke about business tax receipt rates, and we haven't seen one of those since 2015, and we're allowed to go up 5%. How much did we go up in 2015? Do you recall, Mr. Sherman?
I think some of the fees actually did go up 5%, but what we tried to do, and I want to say those that were around the $100 limit, we kind of capped those so that they didn't go up the whole 5%. I'd have to go back and pull it out, but we were trying to be conscious of the people, the very small 1-person office, one thing, and try to keep those lower. But I could certainly go back and pull that resolution and back up if you'd like.
Okay, that not necessarily. I just was curious, but obviously, these are going to be the tough decisions that we all have to make, and I can certainly understand that we have to do it. But I'm going to have some real strong resistance and hesitation about increasing any business tax receipt rates if our level of service when it comes to businesses stays the same. Because as you know, in administration as well as the city attorney, I just undertook that endeavor again to try to get one, and it takes almost 3 months. And I haven't even paid the actual business tax receipt rate yet. At that point, I've only paid the rate for the inspection. Then you got to turn around and consider the fire inspection. But I just don't want us to have the same level of service when it comes to opening a business. So many times I get caught outside of coming inside the building now more than ever because the city hall isn't open, where there's somebody that has to go through what seems like a mountain just to get over just general information that is lacking on our website, that's not exactly clear inside the code on how to open up certain types of businesses. Not only is there a lack of information, but it seems almost insurmountable, the number of different hoops. And if I can use the manager's term, it seemed like a moving target. So I would only support us looking at business tax receipt rates when we can fine tune what it takes to actually open up a business in the city of Riviera Beach, and making sure that everybody pays their fair share. And that's what my concern is with that. And obviously I hope that there's going to be more dialogue if this is something that we have to do, because obviously the business tax receipt is something that we have to deal with in the city of Riviera Beach, but then there's also another Palm Beach County business tax receipt that is not as much, but certainly businesses have to comply with the county requirements as well. I wanted to ask a question, Mr. Evans, about the 2020 slide. I believe it was the second one that you showed that had FTE of 425 for fiscal year 2020, where we're at now. What is the vacancy? How much is our vacancy as far as this current year? Because if you're talking about cutting 20% going into 2021, I calculated that at about 85 positions. So what's our vacancy rate currently as of where we stand currently?
Mr. Sherman, I don't know if you have that data handy, and he can be able to provide that specific. And so what we did is We looked at positions that were historically vacant, positions that were never filled. Those were the positions that were the first to go. And then we even looked at a situation where we usually carry the entire amount for our school resource officers as well as our crossing guards, et cetera. Well, we know that school is going to open in a digital form at the end of the month, and we don't know as to when those particular positions would look to. So we modified that based on the information that we believe to be the best and most accurate information. We've also looked at some of the summer programs and some of the things that we traditionally have done and looked to reduce some of those staffing elements as well. Mr. Sherman, were you able to pull that?
Yeah, I was. I just reran the report. Right now, our vacancy is $2.9 million. Considerable amount of that, though, is in the fire department and over at the utility district. Then we have a lot of the part-time summer programs, which are obviously vacant at this point.
And Councilman, to your point, one of the biggest challenges is we'll show this as part of the budget presentation, not at this meeting, but it's called the hidden paycheck, that an individual, takes, you may pay him $50,000, but you may pay $40,000 in benefits. And so those are situations when you eliminate a position that may be a $50,000 a year position, you're really seeing a savings of $90,000 because you're eliminating all the other ancillary costs associated with employing that particular individual.
I think that's useful. We've seen it last year and it put things in perspective. I think we were doing negotiations for one of the bargaining agreements, and it was really informative. In fact, Mr. Evans, I think you're being generous. Isn't it more like 50-50, or in some cases, more in benefits than actual salaries?
Well, with the new collective bargaining agreements and contracts, it's probably close to 50-50.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And Mr. Evans, just forgive me because you've been saying a whole lot. And I wanted to kind of make sure I understood this, because you said that it's our desire to get more owner-occupied housing within the city. And I certainly agree, but doesn't that put us in a situation where we have more individuals taking advantage of homestead, and how does that benefit us as far as the ad valorem dollars that we collect?
That's an excellent point. We anticipate that if it is more owner-occupied dwellings, that people will make investments into their home, they will care for their homes, and you will see the neighborhoods transform versus some situations where we have absent landlords. And so we believe that if it's owner occupied and that's that family's most valuable asset, that invariably you're going to see a situation where they take the time to keep up the property and conscientious of the surroundings, et cetera. And so we believe that that is going to kind of address the loss that you would see, to your point, if they're now under Save Our Homes and getting that protection.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilman McCoy, I had a question in reference to the business tax receipt. Were you asking the question based upon the concern with not wanting to see an increase in business tax receipts? Because I didn't hear, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss something in reference to Mr. Evans mentioning or stating that business tax receipts would be increased, or we'd be using that as additional revenue. I'm not sure if I missed that part.
Well, it's, I guess the way this slide is kind of laid out, obviously this is some of the highlights, and we have to know that if we're not looking to raise the millage rate, then we're going to have to look at other areas to increase revenue for the city. That's why I specifically asked how much of ad valorem dollars went into the general fund. But I guess I'm probably presumptuous in this statement to think that this is probably something that's going to be on the table for us to increase BTR rates.
And I was asking because I assumed that based upon your interest in that you were just jumping the gun a little bit and hopefully addressing a concern that may not come about. So I just want to make sure I didn't miss something, because I'm in agreement with what you said as well. But also, I want us to, at the same time, give Mr. Evans an opportunity to present so that we're not here all night, because there's going to be a lot of discussion that we're going to be having in reference to this budget, because this is going to be our biggest year. This is our first budget with Mr. Evans. So I want us to try to get through it, because we have multiple budget workshops. And if we continue to jump in with our concerns immediately, it's going to drag it on a little longer. And that was my concern with kind of addressing that now. Because I thought I missed it, but I didn't understand why we were addressing the business tax increase if that wasn't something that was even presented. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No, I'm sorry if I confused you, but I understand what you're saying, but we only get one bite at the apple. And if this is coming up and Mr. Sherman alludes to, we haven't raised business tax increases, we haven't had any business tax receipt increases, he's saying it for a reason. And I want to make sure that I understand.
I didn't get that allusion from Mr. Sherman, so that's why I was confused as to why we had that discussion. But either way, I mean, moving forward, I want to get through these meetings, and yes, we do have one bite. So for us to get it right, let's just get it right and focus on what we need to do. And when it does come up, I want to address it, because I'm in agreement with what you're saying, but I want to get through these meetings though.
Okay, Mr. Evans?
Yes. And so the intent behind that was just to notify the board that we haven't increased it. It's not projected in the revenues that the city is looking to anticipate as part of this particular budget. But as we go through and the board has subsequent conversations, there may be a desire to discuss that in more specificities. So moving to the next slide, this talks about the Riviera Beach top 10 property taxpayers in FY 2020. This is a list that we want all our residents to be on, because this is a good thing if you're on the list, of course, for the city of Riviera Beach. But one of the things that I really want to call your attention to is FPL. And FPL's taxable value is close to $1 billion with their asset, and they contribute to the city of Riviera Beach $8 million in property taxes. However, being that it is the type of operation it is, it's a depreciating asset. So the revenue collection actually goes down. We don't see it appreciate in value. So when we see this and people get excited, you have FPL, the reality is over the next amount of years, a 10-year period, that asset is going to depreciate, and then eventually FPL would make increased investments and the number will go up again. But unlike a situation when you look at the Marriott Resort Hospitality Corporation that is assessed at $123 million, and the city of Riviera Beach collects roughly about $1 million in revenue. So if you look at all these particular businesses that are listed here, they generate about 23% of the ad valorem revenue that the city collects. And remember, we collect about $47 million. And so when you look at all those business in totality, their taxable value is sizable, and the taxes that they do pay to the city of Riviera Beach is approximately $11 million and 23% of the overall pie. Okay. Moving into the next slide, and this is the slide that when staff provided this slide to me, it was kind of concerning. And for the first time, staff and myself were able to see we have to do something. We have to do something to get people in our community to have owner-occupied dwellings. 43% of the total number of your residential market here in Riviera Beach is owned by individuals that do not reside in our community. And that poses for significant challenges. You see that 15% is homesteaded property. In totality, that generates about $28 million for the city of Riviera Beach. On the other side, if you look at commercial, and you can see the composition of the commercial in our industrial park and how beneficial that is to the city. But one of the challenges and the things that we are concerned about is the tangible personal property, which is 20.14%, or approximately $9.5 million, that's generated as a result of tangible personal properties. And that is for items that are inside of facilities. So your medical offices, your heavy machinery and equipment. If companies stop investing or they go out of business, we can see a sizable impact. And Mr. Sherman, if you can provide some insight and some perspective, what the property appraiser has said with regards to what next year may look like, and especially on the commercial and residential side.
Yeah, the concern is that it appears that the residential values should be flat. That's the expectation. The real concern that they expressed during our conversations was obviously on the commercial side, specifically the tourism industry. So again, where we have the resorts on Singer Island, where you're looking at items such as the restaurants, that's where they're expecting upwards of 25% decrease. So again, that'll be assessed come December, wherever we stand with the coronavirus at that point. That's when those values will be determined, and then that'll kick in, as we said, in 2022. So 2021, again, we held fine with those. The other concern that they had is, should any of those business types go to the Value Adjustment Board and attempt to get an adjustment for 2021, nobody knows how that might play out. So despite the fact that they were assessed as December of 19, there is a chance that the virus could impact the values for 2021 should they file. So again, 25% on the commercial side was what they were projecting.
Madam Clerk, could you please let the record show that the mayor has joined us? Thank you.
Okay, moving to the next slide. So this is the composition of the residential units in our community, broken down per taxable value. You see that there's roughly about 3% in totality that pay zero taxes to the city of Riviera Beach for any type of service that is being provided. And then you can see the share in the breakdown. The average taxable value of a residential property in the city of Riviera Beach is $232,000, and we have approximately 13,000 units within our community.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, what does that mean when you say zero taxable value, zero? What is that?
It could be a multitude of things. It could be exemptions. It could be,
Okay.
yeah, there's a litany of different things. Yeah. Okay. The next slide really speaks to something here that I think is very important. We talk about our millage rate, 8.4520 mils. And in our community value survey, I think the number was well over 70% of individuals that took the survey did not realize that only 38.14% of your total entire tax bill is remitted to the city of Riviera Beach. So if you look at each of these columns and you see a gross property value at 75,000, 100,000, 200,000, and 2 million, and then of course we have FPL, you can see what the breakdown is as it relates to taxable revenue. So if you own a property that has a value of 75,000, your tax bill in its entirety is about $554, of which the city of Riviera Beach collects $211, but the Palm Beach County School Board and Palm Beach County collect 54% together as it relates to the services or the revenue that they collect for the services that they provide. And so as you go down the list, you can see that it is significant as you continue to go up what an individual or individuals would pay for taxes in our community. But if you look at FPL, and when we talked about what FPL pays and then what they would benefit by reducing the millage rate, it is quite significant. And so when we did look at, the average house saying 232,000, the average property tax bill for that is about 3,500, of which $1,268 is collected by the city of Riviera Beach, and the rest is remitted to other taxing entities. And so when you pay your entire tax bill, not all of it goes to your local government. And then there's also discounts that is provided as well. Ad valorem revenue is the most reliable revenue to collect. The city books by statute to collect 95% of the revenue, because invariably somebody does end up paying the taxes. But this is a good breakdown to see how much of your taxes and where does it go. And in my, to digress for a moment, in my letter to the Board of County Commissioners, I do communicate that, and I'll show you on the next slide, that the city of Riviera Beach does send Palm Beach County $27 million on an annual basis as it relates to what our residents contribute for their general operations. And so when we did ask for, when we will be asking for monies to be remitted back in some form or some fashion, obviously we are a partner, and we have for a long time contributed to the county's general operations. The city of Riviera Beach, $47 million, that 38.14, that's the monies that is collected from ad valorem revenue. And then you can see the breakdown as it relates to the school district's operating budget. One of the things that I think is germane to the conversation and the discussion as we go through is that the city of Riviera Beach residents do pay to send monies to Palm Beach County School Board, but also the city of Riviera Beach carries about $600,000 in expenditures on an annual basis to provide certain things such as school crossing guards and school resource officers. Other jurisdictions and other school districts, that is a cost that's usually borne by the district, as it is not necessarily a local jurisdiction's responsibility to provide that. So there has been just limited conversations on the city managers group about those types of fees. Everybody is doing it the same way, but I can tell you in other communities that I've worked in, that's not the case. The school district usually burdens all the costs associated with those particular elements. And if they do have school resource officers with the local jurisdiction, there is monies that are remitted back to the government agency for those services. Okay. Moving to the next slide. This is the slide that we've put together to look at going to that 8.2000 mils and what the impact would be. And so you see, as we go down through the residential properties that have the gross value of 75,000 all the way to 2 million, you can see that the savings are really de minimis, and those large entities such as FPL, the Marriott property, some of the larger properties in our community would be the entities to stand to benefit exponentially as it relates to looking at that particular millage rate. And so we wanted to enumerate that in a slide to show what the savings would be to the property taxpayers, and the impact to the city of Riviera Beach would be about a $1.4 million budget reduction. But to Councilman McCoy's point, if you look at your major disaster fund, that roughly is about $750,000 and goes up as your taxable value goes up. the present value for a mill, Mr. Sherman, correct me if I'm wrong, is close to about $1 million.
That's correct.
So you're almost at the point where probably in the next 2 or 3 years, you will be putting away $1 million in your major disaster fund. And if you wanted to provide some type of relief to your taxpayers, that's conceivably a way to be able to do it, to say that major disaster fund, in lieu of that fund continuing to grow, that maybe you in essence cap it, and then that savings is provided to the residents of this community in a reduction, and that's almost going to be a mill reduction, and that's a sizable reduction when you're talking about, you know, the 0.1s and 0.2s and 0.3s. So just food for thought in subsequent conversations as to how this board can look to address some of the discussions that we've had.
So have you explored administration and finance, if we were to amend the charter, what we would look to take that percent down to? In just in hypothetical scenarios?
We've had brief conversations, but nothing in greater detail. But you know, if the board does have the desire to take a look at that in greater detail, we can bring you something in your subsequent budget conversations to see what that would look like and what the impact would be to the property taxpayers in the city of Riviera Beach by looking to make that switch.
I for one would like that. Do you want to hear from all of us about that, Mr. Evans?
I would, Madam Chair.
Thumbs up if you want that to happen. Easiest way to do it. Looks like Mr. Loss, Ms. Miller Anderson.
Well, I mean, did we mention that was one of the requests before, right? To
I
do
don't
that?
think we, I'm
I
not
thought
sure we
I thought I did.
Well, so you have your marching orders, Mr. Evans, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
the two amounts, I think we were looking at two different amounts. Correct me if I'm wrong, right, Gustavo?
Right, yes, we did look at two different amounts. And so we looked at what it would be if you split it, or a situation where if you decided to say, okay, that goes away, and then that savings is turned back. And so we've had the preliminary discussions with staff, and so we can be prepared fairly quickly to have that as an item that the board can consider. To Councilman McCoy's point, that is something that legislatively you all have the authority to put anything on the ballot for consideration to your constituents.
Okay, yep.
How much time in advance do we need to make that decision prior to the election?
I would have to defer to the city clerk and the city attorney as it relates to how quickly it would have to be queued up for a ballot initiative.
I know we're looking at, oh, go ahead, Ms. Anthony.
Madam Chair, members of the board, are we looking at the March election?
That's the soonest, just so you know, that we could get it on, because the supervisor of elections is not taking any municipal ballot measures until March 2021.
Thank you.
And with that being said, I will give you the date in which we need to have the information submitted to the supervisor of elections office.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, just not necessarily to put on this slide, but at some point, if you could provide me with a breakdown that reflects, say, 500,000 in gross property value and maybe 750 and $1 million, so I can, when people ask me, you know, what it means to their particular property, I can let them know. Probably too much for one slide, but
certainly we can build out the slide to reflect more.
Thank you.
Right. And so when we looked at the 2 millage rate scenarios, in the event that we were to reduce the millage rate, you will also see a reduction of $1.4 million in revenue to the city, but also the revenue payment to the CRA would decrease by $176,000, And then the major disaster fund, the impact would be about 21,000. So the net position would be $1.2 million. So, you know, everything does have an impact when we're talking about the reduction of millage rate, et cetera. Okay. Moving on to the next slide, and Mr. Sherman will speak a little bit about the 2019 tax comparison and the next couple of slides. Mr. Sherman?
Yeah, this slide, what we have done is we have just taken, again, our cohort comparative cities and just tried to lay out, again, a comparative across the board. As you can see, you know, as we've talked about for a number of years with our 8.452%, that does put us up at the top end of the local municipal millage rate. But what's interesting is when you look at the overall millage rate, we're not necessarily 3 spots from the top if you compare across, you know, each individual rate. And what we found is that, again, some of them pay an MSTU for their libraries. Some of them pay into a parks fund where they have a separate millage rate. And that's where you get all the equalization. The other issue that I think is very significant to note on here is City of Riviera Beach, all of our debt service for any of our government bonds, not utility, not stormwater, but our general government debt is within our 8.452. So when you compare that to someone like West Palm Beach, where they have done referendum bonds and they have a separate millage rate for their debt, it's not necessarily apples to apples when you're comparing those. So really that's why you want to almost look at the top lines and see, you know, the variation there. Are we still at the top end? We're still at the top end, but certainly not 3 spots from the very highest rate. On the next slide, again, what we have done in trying to get some comparisons to see really where we map out. Again, we've taken some of our municipalities within Palm Beach County and then kind of tried to look across, looking at the taxable value for each one of those entities, looking at their population, and coming up with per capita assessments and per capita tax. Now, again, we fall down to the very high end of this chart. But again, if you look at our population and our tax values, I think that kind of answers the question of why we end up at the top. Going back to the slide that Mr. Evans presented about the values of our property and 300 plus properties not paying any property taxes and considerable amount of properties at that low end, that kind of explains why our values are much higher. We did break out Riviera Beach with and without FPL because clearly that plays a factor. It didn't move us that much in the overall conversation, but certainly having the power plant located within the city boundaries does change our calculation a bit. And then the third slide that we have, again, is pretty telling. What we've done is we've taken the individual budgets and we've come up with a cost per resident for each of the communities based on a different sector of the services that we provide. So we have the general government side, the administrative side, then we look at the public safety side, okay? And we're higher than almost every community in those 2 areas. So again, I think as we look back and we talked about the number of FTEs that the city has, there's some room to make these numbers look a little bit better. So we're spending $819 per resident for general government, where someone like Palm Beach Gardens is only paying $364. Our public safety number is $974, and Palm Beach Gardens is at $919. But yet Boca and West Palm and Delray are right there in that public safety number that we're looking at. Now, again, this is partially reflective of the new contract, as we did build some of those dollars into 2020. But again, there certainly is some room to move in these numbers. Do you want me to go to the 2020, or you're going to take that one back?
I will take it back.
Okay.
So moving into the 2020, the 2020 budget was, the general fund was $77 million. As you can see, 59% of that is derived by ad valorem revenue. And then you have the other revenue streams, or the other parts of the pie that make up the revenue that the city collects. We as local governments, as municipalities, are very fortunate that the lion's share of our revenue, unlike the county, is very dependent and reliant on property tax. Usually about 70 to 75% of county revenue is derived by property taxes. Local governments usually have more diversified funding streams. And so as we look at other opportunities to diversify the ways in which we operate and the ways in which we collect our monies, the less reliant we can be on property taxes and more consistent revenue streams is certainly a better approach for us, because when the economy does take an impact, and especially the residential market, the housing market, it has a adverse impact, as you've seen in previous slides. So this is the revenue side of it. And then I think it's the same slide. So this goes into what the projected budget to actual is. So it shows that the revenues for the city of Riviera Beach for projected revenues was 78 million, expenditures 77. And so there's about $500,000 that allows for us to be able to come in within budget and a balanced budget. And so you can see that actual year-to-date 2019 and 2020, the revenues were 73 million, expenditures were 70 million, and the turn back to the general fund was $3 million. In most cases, you have a situation where it's budgeted for turn back into the general fund. And that's what ends up building your fund balance, the monies that go unexpended or vacancies, etc. And I will turn the next two slides over to Mr. Sherman.
Evans, before we go forward, I'm trying to get some clear understanding. I was looking at, I think, slide 18.
18.
We had this one, and then the one. Okay, if we start here, I'm trying to find out. So let's just take, for instance, this bottom highlighted, Riviera Beach with FPL per capita. Oh, so this is the 2019 assessment, and you're suggesting that that is $1,333 per capita. So per every resident, and that's based on the 35,460 people. But the next slide, we're moving from $1,300 up to what I calculated at $1,955 per resident. Is that about accurate?
Yes, sir. And this is for 2020.
Correct.
Yes.
You mean, wait. I'm sorry. When you say 2020, you mean currently now or 2020?
Yes, sir.
2020?
Currently now.
The current year budget.
Okay, so
So you're seeing the increase. What I think what you're trying to show is the increase from the with FPL for the 1,300 to now when we go into the current year budget, and you're looking at roughly at about 1,900.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. So here's I think we went over that and this one, and then Mr. Sherman, if you can speak to the next couple of slides.
Yes, this slide here, what it does, and hopefully you can see the two different lines there. The green blue line are our revenues, and the red line, the red and blue line, are our expenditures. So what we've done is we've gone back to the year 2000 and tracked the performance year to year of the city. So when you see where the expenditures are above the revenues, that means the city actually ran a deficit for that year. So if you look at it like 2004, the red line is actually above the expenditures. In 2011, again, the revenues are above the expenditures. But what this is showing is how well we have actually performed since 2015. So when we talk about, again, cash on hand and fund balance, what's really happened is the city has, coming out of the recession, has really benefited for the last 5 years. And you can, again, see that spread that our revenues have actually outperformed the budgets, and the expenditures we've been able to maintain within those budgets and haven't run deficits now since 2011. Now, again, as far as that 2020 projected, that was the slide, in essence, that the manager just showed previously, where, you know, it's going to be tight. People are going to have to pinch their pennies for the next couple of months to remain within budgets on the expense side. And even though we have taken a few hits along the way due to the pandemic, especially in the state revenues, we actually still are projecting that we will be over budget or exceed our budget by about $500,000 for 2020. On the next slide, we start looking at where we were for 2021.
Madam Chair.
So again, it is effectively the same slide, except
Mr.
now
Sherman.
we've added the 2021 budget numbers on the right-hand side.
Mr. Lawson has a question, Mr. Sherman.
Oh,
Mr.
I'm
Lawson
sorry.
has a question. It's okay. Mr.
Mr.
Lawson.
Sherman, if you could go back to the last slide for me.
Sure.
Currently are projected to our revenues. You said this year we're projected to have a saving. We're going to be about 500,000, but the last 4 years we've had a variance of about 20 million.
We've had
Between
some
revenue, anywhere between 16 and 20 million for the last 4 years.
Yeah, typically we have been under budget on the expense side, in $1.5 to $2 million each year. And again, where we bring in additional revenue. So that's where you're seeing that spread for the past couple of years.
Okay, I just want to, I guess I need just some clarity in regards to what I see you have documented for 2016 revenue versus expenditures. So these are actual expenditures, not what was actually budgeted. If you could pull up 2016, 17, and 18, and if you guys could kind of review what the actual budgeted expenditures were, so I can get an understanding and look at what we're going into for 2021. Because right now with the actual spending for 2016 came in just around 55 million, but what was budgeted for 2016? And the reason I'm asking is because it looks like the budgeted compared to the actual, we had a variance or savings of anywhere between 15 and 20 million every year. But this year we're coming in projected at only 500,000 versus the 15 to 20 million that we've been averaging the last 4 years. So I'm not sure if COVID cost us an additional $12 million, but I just want to kind of understand.
Well, I think what may be is that capital projects were budgeted and then they never moved forward. And that can be an issue that has created that invariably it was budgeted, but the actual expenditure never occurred. And so things were rebudgeted. So we'd have to do a little bit of research on that.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm very aware of that because one of my concerns is if we're only going to be under budget about 500,000, I'm looking at the parking project that we put in, and I'm assuming that's the only project that expenditure that wasn't completed, and that was budgeted close to 500,000. So I'm trying to just make sure that our budget is making sense because right now, looking at this slide, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm not understanding. So if I could just get some, by the time we have our next budget session, if I could have those information, Mr. Sherman, just based on 16, 17, and 18, what we budgeted, and then what our actual expenses are. Because I see you have actual expenses, but you're telling us that we had savings, but essentially, does that mean it was under budgeted? It wasn't properly budgeted? Did our city not perform properly? Did we not complete the capital budgets we put in place? I just want a little bit more in depth with this and understanding this part. All right.
Certainly. We'll pull out the raw numbers on those and provide them.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I think Mr. McCoy was first and then Ms. Miller Anderson. McCoy.
Real quick, I just noticed which I'm guessing that's 2017 that had the largest, I guess, what was,
yeah.
Is that the 15 million more or less? 55 million and
About 15. Yeah, about 15.
Oh, that was okay. It's kind of hard to see because I only have a portion of the screen. I'm not on a dual screen, so okay.
Well, and I do have to apologize. I guess the staff that made the presentation did not know their manager's blue-green colorblind, so I can't help you guys on these next couple of slides. So that's why Mr. Sherman is presenting them, because I just see a whole bunch of different things.
Well, I think that's the year that you were here for a short while. And saved a lot of money when you were not here, Mr. Evans.
Money, we appreciate
it. No problem. No problem. All right, we'll move to the next one.
Yeah, let's go to the next one. Okay, so on this one again, when we started the budget process and we
I had a question. I'm sorry.
Yep. Okay.
No,
I'm so sorry. I have my finger up, but
I'm sorry, but Ms. Miller Anderson had hers up first, I think. So first,
Oh, okay.
Miller, yeah, thank you, because I was looking at the slides. Ms.
I
Miller
was just
Anderson.
gonna let you go right on and
No, that's okay.
jump
Sorry.
back in later. No, it was just to Mr. Lawson's point about the 500,000. Could that possibly be the money that was going to be put away for the housing authority as well, maybe? Or is that not a part of that?
Yeah, that's not a part of it, and parking
Okay.
in a separate fund as well. But we'll get you the raw.
Okay.
Ms.
And
Lanier.
I just wanted to ask a quick question. How much of this revenue over expense is what is considered deferred maintenance?
No, actually, in 2015 and forward, we've actually put a lot of money into maintenance to avoid that. No, it's just it's primarily a factor of the economy and how well things performed. And again, we save money on the expense side in a good economy because it's more competitive and we can get better pricing. So it's a combination of the two, but again, we'll get some more details to provide to everyone.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
All right.
When we started the 2021 budget, we actually, it starts in finance. We put together all the salary projections, the revenue projections, working with the departments, making estimates on health insurance and those types of issues. We actually started, I believe the manager has mentioned at past meetings, we were $4.2 million difference between what we were projecting for revenues and what was being asked for from the departments. Part of that was $1 million additional capital dollars. And part of what has really changed that $4.2 million was the state revenues. Initially, as we were again going through the early stages of the pandemic, may recall that we were being informed by the state that our state revenue distributions were going to be cut. Our sales tax was cut, our revenue sharing dollars was cut. So we were actually carrying a total reduction of state revenues in the initial budget rounds of about 30%. Those numbers, though they did come in lower than 2020, we were able to actually increase our revenue projections, which is how we ended up to this $1.9 million deficit, along with taking out that $1 million that had been put in for capital. So again, going through the budget process, dealing, as the manager said, with his committee, dealing with all the department heads, we really have had to come back and reduce the asks, the requests from the departments, this $1.9 million. And that's how we get to the $83 million where we are today with what has been presented.
The next slide is I'm briefly going to walk through some of the things that we've done as it relates to COVID-19. Back in March, we did execute a local state of emergency concerning the novel coronavirus. We then quickly moved into our incident command system to try to address this pandemic as best as we possibly can. We have coordinated with Palm Beach County State Emergency Operations to ensure continuity of operations, and that there was an effort from the city of Riviera Beach to address the challenges that we heard early on that the virus would have in communities that look like ours. And so we were successful in obtaining a mission resource request from the county and the state. We were successful with a lot of the obtaining testing from the state, and that's a testament to the elected leadership that was advocating consistently. And I think every council person that I had a conversation with was looking to advocate for testing in our community, and we were successful and have been successful in testing multiple individuals in our community in multiple forms and fashions. The Health and Human Services Chair, Councilperson Lanier, is actually going to be rolling out a new initiative that no other municipality is doing, which we are not scared to be out in the forefront, to look to do something in the evening. We know that a lot of folks may not be able to go to a testing site on a weekend, so we're going to look to partner again with the Black nurse practitioners of Palm Beach County to do testing in the evening. We have distributed over 18,000 meals to persons in our community, and has still and will still be doing that until the start of school commences. In most cases, most recently, we've had situations where we've in fact ran out of food, and the line stays queued up and backed up for hours for individuals in our community coming to receive those services from the city of Riviera Beach. We have done mass giveaways and distributions throughout our community, and we have consistently done that. We have looked to do targeting mass distributions where we visited convenience stores and other facilities throughout the city. We have mailed over 15,000 masks to the residents of Riviera Beach, and we did see Palm Beach County follow suit by distributing masks to over 650,000 households in Palm Beach County, to include Riviera Beach. We did also set aside a member of our team to work with ALFs and senior centers to ensure that the vulnerable populations in our community did not see an adverse impact associated with this virus. And we've been very successful with regards to that. We have provided testing and PPE to the homeless community, and we have monitored ALFs and senior citizen centers in our community on a daily basis, and that information has been provided to the emergency command staff. As you can see, we've tested over 500 people in our community from multiple locations multiple agencies involved. And so we're very proud of what we were able to do on the city side. Additionally, there is still testing that is going on at other facilities, and we're working towards getting into an arrangement with another provider that I'll speak about here shortly as it relates to our employee testing. A virtual platform for city council meetings and other meetings. This was something that all of us tried to find a way as to how this is going to work. And so we were learning on the fly, but I think staff got a very good handle on it. We did virtual weekly calls with the community and the city council to keep you attuned to what's going on as it relates to COVID-19. We created a COVID education compliance team that was intended to go talk to businesses and making sure that they're following all the guidance and recommendations provided by the CDC. We established programs and protocols for our beach reopening to make sure we can do it safely and responsibly, as other entities have asked us for our plan and have deployed it in other jurisdictions. Completed a comprehensive workplace inspection and safety program. We've inspected all facilities. We've provided educational and training for individuals in our community as it relates to how to safely be able to operate their particular business. We were successful with working with a certified mental health counselor to assist some of our young folks during this new norm, that it's okay to talk about feelings and emotions, and we were able to do that on a digital platform. And I've heard some great remarks with respect to the success of that program. Developed a couple of policies: telecommuting policy, workplace safety, return to work, and continuity of operation plan, to ensure that we can continue to provide services throughout the duration of this pandemic. The council all were established committees, and all are chairing certain committees for the community's needs, from business assistance to health and human services to clergy, community to public safety. We did wrap our hands around everything that we could do, fast track permitting, any and everything that we can do to move our city forward. There was a council person that was spearheading the initiatives, and staff has been working to help facilitate some of those things. With the city and CRA, it will be approximately $400,000 of monies that will be remitted to the community for business assistance grants that are, of course, with the intent that if they do not attend any of the training and the courses that we have offered, that they are to remit payment back to the city, but they do have a year to do that. So we have rolled out a program to address some of the challenges our local business community, and then a variety of drive-through celebrations for our seniors, our senior citizens, our grad bag giveaway, you name it. We have found a way to try to do everything we could to have some form of normality for our communities in light of the challenges that COVID has presented us, and continuing to make sure that our employees stay safe and we can continue to do the job that we're entrusted to do. Next slide is the city goals.
Mr. Evans.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, and I don't have any too many concerns about that, but again, this is very interesting to see you go down that list, because when we're involved in operations, and we probably get over 20 calls, at least I probably around the area of 20 to 30 calls a day, and many of them have been addressed in the last two slides that you brought up. So I want to take the opportunity again to commend you for bringing forth a number of these initiatives, because after being here, we almost kind of forget the amount of stuff and the services that we provide. And even still, sometimes I know it doesn't exactly meet every need of every one of our residents, but for Christ's sakes, that's a lot that we did just since March. And I want to certainly commend you and administration and the other members of the board, because it's quite a bit. But I just realized, and I got to say it again, sometimes it just doesn't meet everybody's needs. And we have to have those unfortunate conversations where we tell people we can't help them. But again, thank you for your leadership in helping launch that, because you started the city off as being the trendsetter. Now I see everybody walking around with Palm Beach County COVID-19, man. So again, thank you for that addition, and thank you for all that you've done relative to what we've had to encounter during the pandemic.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. So as we moved into the strategic focus areas, and this was the direction that the city council wanted to make sure that was the foundation for the budget and the budget priorities. So as we've looked to build out budget priorities and initiatives moving forward, all these elements are key into the decision-making process of staff and items that we look to bring forward to you all. And from the staff standpoint, if what we're trying to accomplish does not fit into these strategic areas, we then ask ourselves, should we be in the business of doing it? So achieving a sustainable economy. We've talked about the importance of economic development, redevelopment. How do we look to leverage our assets in our community for the purposes of achieving a sustainable economy, but also raising the needle and the expectations that we have, building great neighborhoods. One of the things that you will see is that we will be bringing forward some ideas and some concepts and having discussions as how do we go to owner occupied dwellings, and then how do we try to address the nuisance that we have in our community, and taking more aggressive steps to address those nuisance properties that we have in our community, and holding our landlords, our absentee landlords, accountable. Accelerate operational excellence. We are moving a lot of departments into the queue for the purposes of being prepared to go through the accreditation process to bring our operations up to par with the industry's best. Enhance government stewardship. We are looking to incorporate transparency portals. The city's new website should be up and operational in about the next month. The website right now is down, and we apologize for that. It's IT is working feverishly with our one of our providers. There's no security breach or anything like that. It's just the website is down, and we are very proud on what the mock of the new website looks, and it really brings us into the 21st century, and the community is going to be really excited about that. Strengthen community engagement. We've got a lot of community engagement that's on the horizon. Community value survey. Ms. Noel will be doing a presentation sharing the community value survey that we will provide to the community. We also have a couple of community meetings that we will be facilitating when it comes to the sanitation services contract that will look to be going out in the next year. Streets projects that we are going to be looking at doing digital engagement, the virtual Citizens Leadership Academy. All those programs are going to move to a virtual platform so we can reconnect with our community. We will get back into doing coffee with the manager in a digital format. So we're looking at ways over the next a couple of months to really re-engage our community and get them involved in what's going on in the city of Riviera Beach. And thank you for the board for allowing for us to hire a dynamic individual to complement Mr. Stevens' team. And I don't know if you all have known, since Mr. Stevens has been, as I digress for a moment, with the city, he has never taken 1 week off. He's going to have the depth and the ability to take 1 week off, but that's if he requests it and I have to approve it. So that still we may keep that streak alive, but nonetheless, nonetheless, we're excited about the new additions to the team. So, the backdrop is Riviera Beach 2030, to let the community know that this elected body is not looking at 2021, but is looking at 2021, 2022, 2023, all the way to 2030, because we are definitely going to move the needle and address some of the challenges that should have been addressed a long time ago. So as we get into,
Madam Chair, I just wanted to ask,
Yes.
what about about all of our stuff with the new facilities and everything?
that is, we are going to be surprising the community with that. And I will
Okay.
just take a brief time. What we're doing
Okay.
is staff is securing the services of an architect. The architect will be meeting with each of you, and you will be having that discussion with them and then coming up with your bubble diagram and your presentation. Once that happens, we'll bring you all back together, and then we'll have you all talk about which parts do you like, don't like of each other's, and then being able to come up with three
Right.
concepts that we can share to the community. So that's already in the process, and so that's going to be an exciting time for us to move that forward.
Oh,
But thank you
good,
for that,
good.
Councilperson. Yes. So some of the major initiatives that we look in to fiscal year 2021 is a fire assessment. And we've had the conversation with the board at the last budget sessions that we had last year about what needs to occur in order for us to move forward with a fire assessment. I have been in an agency, and probably one of the first agencies to move forward with a fire assessment. And a fire assessment really is a tax equity tool. You have a situation where in a lot of municipalities, the fire assessment is utilized to bring more payers to the table. So in our community, we have 3% of the property that don't pay anything for any municipal services. Well, if you did levy an assessment on those properties of $100, just to say, you would generate $20,000 annually. But you can look at taking that $20,000 and you can pledge that for capital infrastructure associated with the provision of fire service, or to effectively look to buy apparatus and the like. One of the things that the fire assessment and the statute says that it has to be fair in apportionment, and the property owner has to derive a benefit from the assessment. When doing an assessment, and when we did the assessment when I was the manager in Haines City, the intent behind that was that a large portion of our properties did not pay property taxes. And we knew we needed to address some of the failing infrastructure as it relates to municipal facilities. And so we went through a fire assessment process and was able to generate approximately $3 million. And that was able to take the burden off of the general fund. That money can only be utilized for the provision of fire service. And then we went through a bond validation hearing where the courts actually, we filed a lawsuit against ourselves. So in the event that it ever challenged, we had a judgment that said that the city did move in the appropriate action, fulfilled appropriate notice. In the event that, one of the things we did as well is we exempted religious institutions and we created hardship provisions. If individuals do have a hardship, what would happen is the assessment would have to be paid for by the general fund because in the way the assessment was established. We believe that if we're able to generate $2.5 million, we can address some of the personnel requests that have been asked by the fire department, but also it will generate enough revenue that the city of Riviera Beach can go out to the bond market and we can construct all 4 municipal fire stations today. And that is something that we certainly want to do and move forward with addressing our public safety assets, as well as that provides additional relief to the general fund. And so when you look at, and when I was in Haines City, I was able to reduce the millage rate by $0.25 mil because of instituting the fire assessment, because it brought more folks into paying for the collective service. And so Mr. Sherman will get into the specificities as to what happened in 2012, the methodology, and then kind of go into what the formulas would look like. And this is something we've already got an RFP out on the streets for a consultant to assist us in the process in the event that this is a direction that the board would like to go in and realize that, again, it can only be utilized for fire service. An economist actually looks at your municipal budget and specifically your fire budget, and they extract what is specific for fire service, and that's your availability fee. They do not levy an assessment for EMS because not everybody ends up for EMS. We have hard costs that are associated with the provision of fire service that the availability says when somebody picks up the phone and dials 911, the fire crews can roll out and they take the wet stuff and put it on the red stuff. And so that is the same thing similar to that of your United States military. There's a hard cost for carrying those assets. And so we have to be prepared to respond. And so that is the availability fee for the service. And that's how most entities do it. You have a flat rate that everyone pays, and then it's based either on square footage or relative improvement value, et cetera. So I'm going to turn this part over to Mr. Sherman to provide a little bit more information and some context.
You're also going to change the slide, right? Thank you. What seems like a lifetime ago, back in December, we were at the community center on Singer Island. We made a full presentation of the fire assessment fee. Back in 2011, 2012 was when the report actually came out. City of Riviera Beach actually hired a consultant and went through the process of apportioning out the fire costs. And that was the presentation that, in essence, I just repeated back in December. Tonight, I just want to kind of refresh some of the options that were laid out in that fire assessment fee. And as the manager said, this would absolutely have to be refreshed. These numbers are very stale at this point. And we're required by statute to do that anyway. I believe that back in 2011, if you look at option 1, and we'll just really focus on the residential rate because everything else kind of feeds off of where you set your residential rate. They had determined back then that $365 would pay for 100% of the fees or of the costs related to the fire service. So that's why that $365 number is on the sheet. That was all in. The number today is obviously higher than that, but we wanted to use the 365 that they presented back in 2011. If you go down that column, as the manager said, you apportion out there's various methodologies to do the apportionment, but they did it on a square footage basis. And the $365 would have raised $7.5 million of revenue. As the manager said, there are properties that end up being exempt. Typically, it's the religious organizations. Government is typically exempt. And when they did the analysis back then, they took out $800,000 worth of the fire fee, leaving them with $6.7 million. So what could the city do with $6.7 million if we chose to go down option number 1? We would put $750,000 into the operating budget. And what that in essence does is it pays for 3 firefighters and 2 EMS captains. We would still be able to put $3.2 million into fire capital. So that would not only be for fire stations, but also rolling stock. And we would be able to reduce the millage rate down to 8.1 mils, giving property tax relief of $2.7 million. Option 2, which is where most people are today, and the next slide will show you where some of the other communities are. This is kind of the low end at $100. That generates $2.5 million of net. And again, we had that $2.5 million. We would pay for the 3 firefighters, the 2 EMS captains, and leaving us with $1.7 million for fire capital. What we've done for the 4 fire stations is we figure that we need about $13 million to be able to, that would come from this fund. And that's debt service of around $1 million. So the $1.7 million would not only be able to cover the debt service, it would also still be able to provide some dollars to rolling stock. But you would actually have to go out and borrow those funds secured by these revenues. We also then have options 3, which is at $25 a unit, and option 4, which would just be $10 per residential unit. As you can see, that generates $627,000 and $216,000. And then from that, we would use that all in operations to either fund 2 firefighters and the 2 EMS captains, or just 2 firefighters. And no capital under options 3 and 4. There would be no dollars for capital. Now, going to the next slide, what we did is we actually pulled some comparative fire assessment fees. Actually, Boca Raton actually publishes their preliminary budget, and they had the comparatives within their budget. So I pulled it out of their presentation. And as you can see, West Palm Beach is at $100. Boca Raton is at $145, and going all the way up to $313 in Hollywood. And there's various numbers in and out of there. What's interesting is I was able to go back and find the amount of revenue that Boca Raton actually generates from their fire fee. And as the manager mentioned early on, part of the issue when we're talking about our millage rate is because we really don't have a very diversified source, revenue source streams coming in. If Boca Raton was to take that $145 fire fee and eliminate it, that's $12.6 million hit to their budget, which is about 15% of their property taxes. So they would actually have to add that $12.6 million to their property tax rate, and they'd be looking at a millage rate going up 15%. So what's interesting when you go back and you look at Boca Raton, where the city has maintained the same millage rate since 2015, Boca Raton has actually had their millage rate increase every year over the last 5 years. Along with this fire fee, it allows them to keep their millage rate down, but they're still seeing increases in that millage rate. But it puts the city, again, if we're talking about the $100, which would allow us to fund the positions that the chief has requested and fund the replacement of the 4 fire stations at the low end of this scale, right where West Palm Beach is at the $100. My understanding is from Mr. Little today is that today was the due date for the proposals. I do not know how many proposals we actually received today. I haven't seen them yet, but we certainly will come back and inform you what we find in those proposals.
Mr. McCoy.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So if we can go back, Mr. Evans, to the slide just previous. And yeah, right there. So it appears that if you're looking at option 1 and option 2, and we're talking about non-ad valorem, we have, I believe I've seen 276 properties that would not be paying this, correct? I've seen that maybe somewhere.
That's correct based on the 2011. Again, we'd have to get those numbers refreshed.
So well, I think this is a good idea, because if you're looking at option 2, for that matter, and these are just based on these 2012 numbers, and if I'm understanding you correctly, the RFP that we have out would be someone else to come up with, I guess, a new pro forma, if you will, regarding these, I guess our various options, our up-to-date pro forma. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, if we just take these numbers for example, and I'm not sold on us particularly increasing taxes, but if you take a residential property and you say And I don't know exactly what defines residential. Is it inclusive of condominiums, or is that considered commercial or what? But we're talking about less than anywhere around 10, maybe a little more, $11 per month at that $100 a unit rate, and obviously $30 a month, which would be essentially added on to the tax bill. So yeah, I'm very much open for that, but wouldn't it be, I guess, a better, and I'm probably not going to say this correctly, but shouldn't we be working backwards? Shouldn't we identify where we want to be as far as how much we should be contributing to, the capital investment fund, and also, if at all possible, if we wanted to take a approach of saying we're going to lower the millage rate, should we? I guess, is that going to be a part of the performer? Is that a way that we can work backwards?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's I hate to put it this way, but it's math at the end of the day. And you're right, we can just decide whether we have sufficient dollars, what we want that millage rate to be. And you're right, it's formulaic. We would just deal with the formulas and come up with the amount of dollars that you want for capital, you want to put in operating, and you want to hit the millage rate.
Okay, and obviously this would be something for, I believe, that will go in effect in 2022, correct? If this is adopted in 21.
It could go in 2021. We would have to do a direct mailing of the invoices because we obviously would have missed the, putting it on the tax bills for the first year. But it would all depend on how quickly, we could get the study done and adopted.
And to that point, we did the direct billing, and when the consultant shared with me that 85% of the individuals that receive the bill from the city will pay the bill, I wasn't too sure about that, but sure enough, actually 85 to 90% of individuals, when we did do the direct billing, the assessment, and then we added it onto the tax roll. So it would be something that we could roll out in 2021. Plus, we would build a module on the website that Jonathan can go in, type in his address. You can see exactly the assessment. The residents get to see all their assessments if they put in the address and all that. So it's a very transparent portal, so you can see the calculation, what the bill is, those types of things. And that was something that the residents appreciated, because as we know, that the most inequitable system is the property tax system that we have. You have two residential properties, one that benefited from Save Our Home since its inception, and somebody that bought their property yesterday. They're paying $1,500 difference, and they're getting the same police officer, same trash truck, and all that. Where this particular item says everybody pays a flat rate, and then you pay based on a sliding scale. So, I know people don't like to hear that the fairest tax is really an income tax, but the fire assessment works similar to that.
What's the sliding scale in this scenario? I don't understand that.
So you would have a situation, for instance, in the formula here, let's go option 2. Everyone will have a base rate of $100. Now the board can say that the base rate is $100 and you did not want to charge, residentials, because we charged $100 and then we did 85 cents per $1,000 of relative improvement value. And then you had situations where you had commercial facilities, like here, it's 18 cents per square foot, but then you can set a cap. So realistically, it's like putting a spigot in the wall, and then you as the board annually determine how much you want to generate as it relates to the fire assessment and what are the ways in which you choose to use it. So if you say that it's a flat rate, no relative improvement values, and commercials are to be handled like this, the economists will build out the system how the board wishes to have it implemented.
Okay,
Right. So we'll go into the fiscal year 2020 assumptions. We were successful in negotiating the PBA contract, and we have began the discussions as it relates to IAFF, which is our fire union. We anticipate being able to wrap this contract up pretty quickly. We're not too far apart, so we can anticipate bringing this to a resolution. We're also recommending in this particular budget, all employees receive a 3% increase. The health and dental insurance, I did provide the board with a memorandum that the claims to premium ratio for the city of Riviera Beach is quite high, and our plan is running about 31% over what it should be running to run flat. So basically, for every dollar that we send to Aetna, it costs them $1.31 to handle our book of business. The renewal rate that they proffered to the city of Riviera Beach was a 31% increase. And so we did go back and tell them that that was a non-starter. We have worked with them and done some plan changes and modifications, and are going to be sharing with you all tomorrow what the plan modifications are, where we got the actual health and dental insurance renewals to an 8.9% increase, which is a significant savings to the city with no modifications as it relates to physicians or the network. We are looking to transition holistically to a high deductible health plan. And we did notice that, and it's an in-network plan, and 97% of our employees utilize in-network services. So the broker is slated to make a presentation to you all tomorrow to share the elements contained in the health and dental insurance renewals. And we believe that the plan will function similar to the existing plan, insert additional consumerism, and keep the cost for the city lower, because if we did have that 20 or 25% increase, it would certainly impact our ability to continue to operate without making some additional revenue enhancements or reductions. The general liability insurance, we've got a 20% increase. Staff is working on making some modifications to that number and seeing if we can get that number below that as much as we possibly can. And operational increases of 2%, revenue increases of about 4%, and then the utility district will be prepared to provide some information to the board to move forward with 6% rate increase as recommended by the rate consultant. And this is basically one of the first steps as we look to address the water quality in our community and move towards a long-term solution for our water treatment facility. The next one here is just looking at the health insurance, which is one of the largest line items in the budget. As you can see, over the years, the insurance has increased. There has been fluctuations. You'll see in 2020, we did have that decrease because we made the move to a high deductible health plan. But right now, our agency is split. Some are on the high deductible health plan and some are on the buy-up plan. And so by making the switch to the high deductible health plan, that's where we see the 9% increase. And we believe with some of the changes that are being proffered that we can conceivably get to a situation where the increases are modest and not seeing the 20 or 30% increases in subsequent budget cycles, because we really want to get our handle on this. And I know that one of the things that we did propose when we were looking at going to that 8.2000 mils was a situation whereby we would ask the employees to contribute for the provisions of health insurance, which is not uncommon with other employers, because I think there is some contractual language that allows for us, if we get over a certain threshold, you can pass the additional cost for health insurance onto the employees. So as it stands right now, that's not what we're recommending, but we have to take some swift and decisive actions here. Traditionally, we've had 4 catastrophic claims. This year we have 13. We have a situation where one particular individual in the organization has utilized $500,000 worth of benefits. And out of the 13 individuals that are on that list, there's an anticipation that the cost for medical care will continue to go up, as well as the impacts associated with COVID. So we're trying to do what we can to still offer a good product, but a product that's affordable to the city of Riviera Beach, and one that addresses the needs of the employees. But the group will be presenting tomorrow. Councilman McCoy, I think you had a question.
Yes, so I think it's just about their presentation tomorrow. So I'm really interested to see what those numbers are as far as the claim numbers, and what period are we talking about? Because it seems like this can't be, first of all, this can't coincide with our fiscal year. That's obvious, because it seems like we had this conversation right around just before the fiscal year in 2019. I'm sorry, before the last fiscal year began for the 1920 year. So I want to know what fiscal year, I'm sorry, not what fiscal year, what period is being considered when they do the claim?
The calendar year. I believe they
so
run calendar year with us.
Okay. And I think I heard you say we're gonna look to go to a high deductible. I think you said comprehensively or holistically.
High deductible health plan would be the plan that we offer, and then there will be a buy-up option, but that would be something that the cost would be borne by the employees, the increased cost. So the base plan that the city would offer is the high deductible health plan, which is the same plan that we offer this year, but I think our numbers are split right down the middle. Half the employees took the high deductible, half of them took the buy-up option.
And that was my next question. What's the percentage of who opted in? So it's about 50%.
Yeah, it's pretty much right down the middle.
Okay, well, Mr. Evans, I certainly am open, and I'm looking forward to their presentation. Has staff explored the idea of going back out to, I guess, to put this back out to the different carriers to see who come in at a better rate? Because
we did, and we pushed back on Aetna very hard. And the reason that we did not recommend going out to the market is because of COVID and the concern that we had with regards to if we went to United and physicians changing and all that. So we thought, in the abundance of caution, in light of this, let's see what we can work out with Aetna. The broker also thinks that based on our really bad numbers, that we're not going to be the sweethearts in the market, because we have a really bad claims to premium ratio, and we do have those 13 high dollar claims. So it would have not rendered any positive number, and we would have probably found ourselves back in the same situation. And we were very conscientious about service disruption for the employees.
thank you. And I appreciate that. Now, that kind of sparked my interest when you started speaking about health insurance. And I don't know if I missed what necessitated, I believe, the 20% increase in liability insurance. Do you have any anything to add on that?
Mr. Sherman, do you have any remarks or comments with regards to liability? Because I was looped in towards the end of those conversations.
Yeah, there were a couple impacts causing the liability to go up. Primarily the active hurricane season. I think after last year with the Dorian scare, I think people are revisiting that. But the other impact is our workers' comp claims have increased significantly, which is driving those numbers as well. So again, with increased salaries and increased claims, we're seeing some higher numbers both on the workers' comp and the general liability side. And then part of what our rate is our reserves and funding our reserves. We've been funding our reserves, so we pay our premiums, and then we add about $1.6 million. Next year, they want close to $2 million based on the activity that they've seen.
In addition to, I believe our cybersecurity did go up as well.
It did.
Okay, so I think there was a conversation that at least touched on, I think Mr. Evans mentioned, if speaking to our insurance carrier, how much of the loss that we can absorb through our disaster fund. Matter of fact, I'll just ask that question now. I think I don't want to ask that question publicly because I don't want to get to talking about exposure and that sort of thing. So that's all I have regarding that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Sherman.
All right. We'll move to the next two slides that Mr. Sherman will present because there are some challenging colors in these wheels.
All right, we'll work on that. So this is the 2021 general fund projected revenues. The budget that has been submitted by the city manager is $81,388,698. As you see from the revenue slide, 60% of the revenues are still coming from the property tax. And as we've talked about in the past, there's very little diversity on the other side of the ledger there. Again, our state revenues are down. Our charges for services are down. A lot of that comes from programs such as Parks and Rec. But for the most part, licenses tended to hold, permits tended to hold. It is that other taxes number that and intergovernmental that actually took a small hit. And then on the expense side, again, we've broken these down primarily by department. We do have other slides as we progress through the other budget meetings that we will break it down more so by expense type, such as payroll and operating and debt service and the like. But this is the operational breakdown. As you can see, primarily the police department gets 27.86% of the budget, and the fire department gets 19.01% of the budget. So combined, 46% of the budget goes to the public safety departments. Now, when you compare what police and fire get, that alone eats up 79% of your property taxes. And then the balance of the departments, as you see, have been laid out on this budget. I would point out too that two items, the CRA TIF in the upper right-hand side is at 7.29%. So in our property taxes, we bring in the TIF revenues and then we distribute that to the CRA. And then the other number at the top is the transfer to the debt service. So that again is 8.55%, a significant part of the budget. And that again does pay for the pension obligation bonds, but it also pays for the $20 million that was used for the street project, and it pays for what we have been borrowing through capital leases for our public safety fleet, trying to bring that back up to current status. We are transferring $4 million over to the capital project fund. That is the money that we have been receiving from FPL since 2015 that we've been putting into our pay-as-you-go capital. And again, as we go through each successive budget meeting, each department will present to the council the detail of their individual budgets.
Question. I'm sorry. What's the difference between general administration and city administration? Did I see that yet? Is there a difference there? What's that about?
Yeah, the city administration is actually the staff. That's the operational stuff of the staff. What we put into the general is sort of those things that are citywide. So that would include things like transfers to the other funds, unemployment, all those things that really don't belong to a particular department. But, you know, so we put them all in that one budget. And again, we can break that down as we move through the budget. It is broken down line item in the documents that you have provided.
Anything else?
All right, so this is the budget calendar that we implemented on the onset of the budget process. We see that we have a budget workshop for tomorrow with the city council.
I'm sorry, Mr. Evans. Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I wanted to ask one question before we get into the calendar. Where does it fit in terms of the money that the CRA owes the city?
For the ocean walk, we'll bring that part of that will be part of your subsequent budget discussions. Staff is doing a little bit more research and wants to have all the details to be able to share that with you.
Yeah, because that could make up a lot of the deficit that the budget has in terms of what is owed to us. Okay.
Yes. Madam Chair and members of the board, I know that we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, but one of your colleagues has expressed some concerns with the 17th and 18th, and I wanted to see if the board would indulge staff to send out a doodle calendar poll to see if you're amenable to moving those particular dates, because we really do want to have the balance of the council present for the budget conversations.
When potentially would we be moving them to?
The dates that I believe we looked at, and Ms. Noel, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, what are the dates that we were looking at from a staff standpoint?
All right, I'm pulling it up right now, just 1 second. But it would certainly be before September, so we're looking at dates for this month, for the remainder of this month. And I'm sorry, just 1 second, as I'm going through.
Are you looking at the 24th and the, well, we can't on the 25th because we have a CRA budget workshop.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we have an email about the virtual ethics, trying to reschedule that. There's a bunch of dates being thrown out here, and it's becoming a very complicated mess trying to, put all this in here. I mean, I thought we had kind of agreed on the 17th and 18th. Is it just 1 or 2 people missing, or, I mean, is it the majority of the people can't come?
No, it's just 1 missing. But I don't know if we can look at the 20th and 21st or the
If you remember,
27th, 20th.
20.
Yeah, but I've already set these dates that I have. So I mean,
Right.
We working people who already got our dates set. So it's real hard now to try and change this midstream.
Well, it's not even a working situation for me. It's just that you're running out of days here, trying to switch up when we already kind of committed and did CRA, and then it's just a lot of people asking for days, and we don't have that many more days left before September.
Okay.
And the 21st is scheduled for that hearing on the second reading of the ordinance. You haven't said that.
I don't have that.
It
I don't
hasn't
have that on my calendar.
gone out yet, but that's the only, I'm just cautioning us not to put anything else on there.
Yeah.
I
On the
just think
Friday, the 21st?
for my say so, I'm telling you now, I've got these dates set. It took a lot for me to set these dates and to be able to make sure I don't have anything in conflict with it. And give me, I understand if a member can't do it. I had to rearrange a whole lot to get these dates in, to put in the CRA dates. I have, some evenings I have other issues going on. So, I appreciate the city making sure that we have these dates well in advance to be able to set this up. So it's really hard at this point to be able to go back and rearrange these dates, the CRA dates, the workshop dates. We're talking about we got city council meetings, we got CRA meetings. That's a lot.
Yep, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you. Well, I do have a question. When were these dates actually issued, and did we agree as a council on these dates, or were these just the dates that were just given to us?
No, they sent us emails and asked us about these dates.
Okay, so these were the dates that we selected?
Yes.
Because I guess I must have missed that email because I didn't.
Yeah.
They weren't selected by us.
I don't think that I selected any of these dates, Ms. Lanier.
They sent out the dates and said, "Are you okay with these dates?" And nobody said no, so that's what the dates that they gave to us. And then
No, I just think they said that. Sorry, Councilwoman Lanier, I think they just said the dates out saying that these were going to be the dates we're having the budget. So that's why once I saw the email, I'm arising a discrepancy with those two dates, as Mr. Evans stated, being that I'm not available and I would love to be a part of the budget discussion. So those two dates, I'm not actually available on the 17th and 18th, since we're talking about the council workshop budget meetings. So if we can find a date that can accommodate, that would be good. But if not, then I would love for my colleagues to go on forward with it, but I would like to be there as well for the budget discussion.
Thank you. And then too, also, Councilman Lawson, I understand, I perfectly understand, but we also have to make sure that the public is noticed of these dates as well. So I sympathize, I certainly do, but I've got these dates set.
This is Marcia. I found the dates that I was suggested. I did consider perhaps the ethics training that's trying to be scheduled, and Miss Anthony, feel free to chime in if anything conflicts. But the dates I have to reschedule, the 17th and 18th too, is going to be Thursday, August 20th, Friday, August 28th, and or Monday, August 31st.
The 20th doesn't work for me because we have the Palm Beach State College ceremony for the graduates of our CCC program.
Okay, so that would
And the 21st doesn't work for me because I won't be available.
Well, here's what I'll tell you. This is our obligation, so I'm going to make it happen. In fact, I see two of these dates that I won't even be in the state, but I'm going to make sure I can log on to participate. But I'm lost because I was looking back at my email and I don't even know if I remember even getting any of these dates. So I didn't even see it. I was looking back and I don't know who they would have come from, but I've only found out about today's meeting when we had our meeting last.
I think they came from Noel. If I'm not mistaken.
I think so too.
Okay, well, I'm going to be there. Just I'll be there.
You said the 28th. The 28th looks okay for me. How about everybody else? Maybe we could move at least one of these dates, the 17th and 18th, and push this back on one of the dates to the 28th. Does that look good for everybody?
But here's the bigger issue. So if you want to consider the 28th, and that's for the virtual training, for the ethics training.
No. In order to accommodate Mr. Lawson, to take one of the dates, the 17th or 18th, and eliminate it and move and create a meeting for the budget on the 28th instead.
Madam Chair,
Oh, are
if
you
I may.
serious? We will have 5 meetings that week. So we have a meeting Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all that week.
And I
Because
can't do Fridays.
I'm,
I can't do
Yeah, you're,
Fridays at all this month. I knew that August is budget month, and so when I got those dates, I set those dates, and so I have other options, other obligations on those other days, and I was waiting for these dates so that I can make sure I can schedule around these dates.
Madam Chair, if I may, we can look at, maybe sending out just a doodle poll. If it works, then it works. If it doesn't, we'll look at the clerk's schedule. We'll look at the council schedule, and then we can bring it up as part of our discussion tomorrow, and see if there was, any way to conceivably address that. If not, and it's the board's pleasure to move on, that that's something that staff will comply whichever direction the board wants to go. But I did want to express that request.
so you'll get us a doodle poll tomorrow morning?
Yes.
Well, I would appreciate that, Madam Chair. So,
Mr. McCoy?
so I'm fine with this, but this is a lot of maintenance for just our part-time elected calendar, right? So whatever happens, can our staff at the city work with the CRA staff, make sure that there is some, so we can kind of at least be consistent, because I'm telling you, there is so many different dates, and then there's so many different commitments that we all have individually. But I just want to make sure that it all works, because now I'm only looking at what's before me, and not, I think this afternoon I did get some correspondence from the CRA, so I don't even know what those dates are. So I just want to make sure it works, and it's kind of collaborated with the CRA.
that's what I've just mentioned, is we do have, she put it for the 25th and the 26th. And so we have a meeting that Tuesday, that Wednesday, and then the city budget that Thursday. And then I even have a question mark by the 29th, that Saturday. Is that still on? Yeah. Is that still one for the city?
I have
That's
it, I have it in here
If
too.
needed, right? If
That's
needed.
if necessary. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, there has to be some coordination between the ethics, the city, and the CRA, because some of these dates that are being thrown out here are in conflict with another email that came not too long earlier about the ethics. So I'll wait for the doodle poll.
Okay.
Okay,
Right. And any questions that the board may have, or any other action items? What I've been able to jot down here is the process that the city would have to undertake as it relates to the major disaster fund, and what that impact would be as a result of a millage rate swap or decrease or what have you. And then some additional information as it relates to our business tax receipt program. And we have the request for the information about the borrow that the city provided for the CRA as it relates to the Ocean Walk. And I think that's, and then of course, the staffing, the proposed staffing modifications, you'll definitely see that.
Mr. Evans, you mentioned that if we were to reduce the millage rate, it would mean that FP&L would pay a significantly less amount of money. Could you give us the impact to the FP&L contribution if we reduce the millage rate but put into place the fire assessment? What would that ameliorate the loss because of the reduction in the millage rate, the loss that we get from FP&L?
Okay. And then Councilwoman Botel, you wanted the taxable value sheet extended. Okay. All right.
Anyone else? Questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So, I'm sorry if this sounds repetitive. I just heard a lot more information than I expected to come to this meeting to get. But even if we take that scenario of implementing this fire assessment, how is that possible for us to get out notice and market this to our community? In the next, I guess we would have to make a determination on this. I mean, I don't understand how that's possible if we're just getting the responses from the RFPs and be able to levy that in the 2020-2021 fiscal year.
As far as your collection for it and getting it out, you're going to probably most likely, it'll take a couple months for the process to begin. So let's just say conceivably it started in October. January would be when you would be putting out documentation and information about the direct billing process. And so you conceivably can start seeing, revenue collections in the month of, March or shortly after that. It just depends on how the process is, because we've been able, in my past experience, I've been able to do it in a year, but you're not going to collect, you may only collect 50 or 60%. And then the people that didn't pay, it will roll on the taxes for the following year. Correct.
Yeah, but it's easy for us to sit here and say that we can collect or we can relieve almost at least $2 million off of what is contributed to general fund. But I think I understand it. I mean, looking at this, but I think there has to be a very concerted and organized effort to sell this to the community as opposed to just sending out a bill. And as much as I want to see some of that strain come off, I just, we have to be able to sell this to the community. And I don't know how we're going to be able to do that in such a short time period. And when you get a bill, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And to your point, Councilman, when we did this in the past, we worked with the fire union. We worked with our marketing team to get the information out. We had community meetings to share about what the assessment is. So people we actually engaged the press to help communicate, hey, this is what we're going on. So it's going to take a concerted effort, but we can map out a timeline and share that with the board as to what the intent is in the event that the board says, hey, move forward in this particular direction.
Okay, just to respond on that. So looking at those slides, there was provisions for institutions. Is that like school district institutions, or what other kind of institutions is that referring to? Hospital institutions?
As far as, well, it's for you have the religious institutions, so they would be exempt, but you would establish a cap. So if you had a property, for instance, like the Marriott, and you had a sliding scale that you would say their assessed value would not be over $15 million or what have you, because you didn't want a situation where you had your commercial entities paying more in the assessment than they were paying in property tax. So, the sliding scale has to be adjusted accordingly.
Okay. That's all I have for that.
Lawson, Ms. Lanier, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And those sediments, Mr. Evans. Oh, Mr. Evans, if you could take the screen sharing off.
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir.
Please. I know it's hard for Dr. Botel to see us. Hard for all of us to see. So, those sediments that Councilman McCoy stated in reference to the fire assessment were the ones that I wanted to address, because it's going to be a tough push to get that done without being able to engage the community and the residents as much as we would like to right now. And then my other concern is that we're talking about lowering the millage rate, but then we're going to add the assessment. So I'm a little bit worried with how we're going to actually be able to still sustain the budget that we're looking to capitalize on with a lower millage rate. And then also it's going to disproportionately affect our residents when you have comparable homes that may be $150,000 to $200,000 versus $1 million, $1.5 million, when they're going to lower the millage rate, which is going to directly affect and help FP&L in those larger homes, but yet we're going to assess all the residents at that same $100, $200, or $300 fire assessment. So I really want us to vet this before we roll this out to our residents. And I think trying to push this into this budget cycle is going to be a little aggressive for us. I know you're up for the challenge and you can get us all the information and we'll vet it quickly, but my concern is really pitching it to the community and making sure that they're aware of what's going on with it. The second concern is going to be that millage rate. I wouldn't be inclined to reducing the millage rate if we're adding on that assessment. I would want to kind of split the baby and find somewhere in the middle that we could kind of work on a number that actually helps us when it comes to analyzing how the assessment is going to directly affect over the next 1 to 2 years with the community. And then the last concern is also the homesteaded properties. I want us to make sure that we can try to give a incentive for those homesteaded residents to have a reduced or no fire assessment if we do go forward with the fire assessment, so that we can kind of encourage home ownership and then homesteaded properties in the community. So adding as many incentives that we can for them.
We can create any type of carve-out provision, but it would have to be paid for by the general fund. So let's say we exempted the homesteaded properties, the general fund would have to pay that money into the fire assessment. So in essence, you negate that. But we can look at situations that income thresholds, we've had situations where those are deferred and those types of things. We can look at what other communities have done for seniors or what have you. That's something that we can look to build out some models for consideration, because these firms are used to moving through these processes pretty quickly and getting the data to us to where we can make informed decisions.
Yeah, because once you said that we could move forward with getting those 4 fire stations built and moving, I'm excited with that opportunity, but I want to make sure we roll it out the right way. So, and also have our residents engaged. So that's just difficult, I know, with COVID, because this had been something that we could have rolled out for them months ago. But essentially, we're stuck in a bubble right now. So trying to get this out to them and educate them without just popping up with a bill on their doorstep is what I want to make sure that doesn't happen.
Mr. Evans, if you could, the presentation that Chief Kurd gave at one of my Singer Island Town Hall meetings was very compelling. It was a little long, but it was really compelling. and it, it convinced me that this was a good thing to do. Could we videotape that? Could you make that part of, can you package that so that we can have the entire community take advantage of that?
And Chief Kurd we can certainly do that. And Chief Kurd is going to give you that compelling argument again, because I told him that it's incumbent upon him and I to work together to sell this assessment. So you can prepare for his budget presentation to talk about the importance as it relates to addressing some of these challenges. So, but yeah, we will make sure that we create the communication pieces and have the conversation with the community about what this is. And I can tell you, the biggest thing that folks appreciate is that this money doesn't go to bureaucrats in administration. It goes straight to public safety. And that has always been the big selling point to it, is that it is not you can't use for anything else but for the provision of fire service, as it has a stipulation.
Mr. McCoy?
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Speaking of, I'm sorry, seems like Councilwoman Lanier was, did you have?
I was next.
Were you next?
Yes. That's okay. I just wanted to say that we're talking about a fire assessment, and but I also want to have you to bring back a scenario where we have a quick recoup of the money that the CRA owes the city. I think the financial people call it extend and pretend. We've been doing this since 2000 for this money. And we need to figure out right here and now how we're going to recoup that money quickly. Because even if we're going to ask the public about a fire assessment, we have to have some accountability in our own shop to be able to say that we're doing what we're supposed to do. So we want to present this to the public. But I really want you to bring back something that shows how we're going to recoup that money quickly.
Now, Mr. McCoy. Thank you, Ms. Lanier.
Okay, so I mean, it's not like they're being deferred. They're still making their payments. We were looking to
They
restructure
just
it.
refinanced it.
I'm sorry?
I said they just refinanced it.
But restructuring
Councilman,
is different. Go ahead.
Councilman McCoy, they haven't made any payments. It's been deferred.
Oh, really? For how long, Mr. Evans?
Since the beginning.
Mr. Sherman, since the onset, when did it start?
One
Since
time.
2009.
Since 2009.
Okay. All right. I think that I agree that's worth revisiting, but I would love to have that discussion. But two other things, Mr. Evans, speaking of, here's a great segue from your point about the public safety. Now, if that's the case, I want us to explore. Actually, no, I don't want us to explore. I want us to go right into an ordinance discussion, because if we're going to levy a fire assessment, then we need to make the police department and the fire department charter departments, because there's no way that I want to see us adding an additional fire assessment to every basically property within the city. And then we need to solidify that in the charter. That's going to be something that we're doing going forward, because that gives everybody reassurances that our people in our fire department and in our police department are going to remain in our department. So I would like that to be done simultaneously with the conversation regarding the disaster fund. And, I would support us, exploring that and bringing that back to some language. But that's very important, especially if we're going to talk about potentially presenting or proposing a tax to go indefinitely. And then, I guess here's that even better question, right? If we're going to do a fire assessment, how do we do that? Is that going to be solidified by ordinance?
Yeah, yes, sir. And you have to vote on it every year. So there is situations whereby you can say no fire assessment or reduce the fire assessment. You have the ability, like I said earlier, it's like a spigot in the wall. You can turn it on, turn it off. You have to, you have the elected body has total control over that.
Okay.
On an annual basis.
Well, I would like to see what the sentiments and the position of the board about solidifying our police and fire in the charter. I know that is something you brought up before, Mr. Evans, and I think it's definitely a part of the conversation that should be a part of the conversation. The other item I had was, and I requested this from you and Mr. Sherman this afternoon, was the sector dollars. And I am looking at those numbers. Mr. Sherman, was that about 2015 or so when those dollars were initially made available to not the council members, but to the 4 districts? Because
I think it was 2015.
okay, and there's a guy from the 1st district. He seems to have a lot of money in his district. So, but in any event, we know Councilman Lawson doesn't have a specific allotment. But I want to see if there's an opportunity, since this was done by way of budget, to perhaps repurpose a small quantity of that to do some other initiatives that I think is kind of put the city in perspective. But in order to repurpose something like that, Mr. Sherman, is that, and I don't mean all the dollars, but just a certain allotment, is that something that we can, I guess I would obviously, I sent Mr. Evans a memo that I wanted to discuss, but is this the time to at least consider that during this budget process, since this was done by way of adopting a budget?
Now, those projects are in the capital improvement plan. So if you're going to adopt the next 5-year capital improvement plan, that would be the time to do it.
So you mean to tell me the dollars that sit in the sector funds are already allocated to a specific project?
No, they're allocated to a sector plan, which does have some detail behind it or an intent behind it. But again, if you're going to reprogram it, when you readopt the 5-year plan, that would be the time to change that purpose.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to start.
Well, I was going to say the money that's in District 4 was allotted to the bridge project over on Singer Island to kind of supplement the dollars that the city had. So those dollars are kind of already spoken for towards that project. But again, that was the council person bringing it forward and saying they wanted to use their sector dollars towards that project. So that was done through the capital program.
Okay. And yeah, I want to certainly try to continue the conversation, but it's a small amount, but I would like not to kind of propose an idea off of the dollars that are already tied in the general fund, but something I think is very much needed here in the city. So I'll meet with the manager on that concept in that pilot program here soon. Thank you. That's all I have.
Ms. Lanier?
Another question I wanted to ask too is that, looking through the budget, and I know we're gonna probably get to this, but just, Mr. Sherman, just off the top of my head, why are all the legislative budgets different?
The budgets are using the payroll projection module in the Tyler. They're very specific calculations. So if someone doesn't have a body in a position right now, that's going to change the calculation. If they don't have a body with health insurance, that's going to change the calculation. So it's interesting you asked that, because I was actually going through today and looking at those budgets and trying to bring them all in line today. But that's why the salary projections, again, depending on where everybody is with their staffing, it would change the numbers.
Okay, and then also I just want to be clear that, we need to make sure that the CRA is on notice that, we're talking about $10 million here. We're talking about $2,000 that was borrowed, in the year 2000, and then they came back and borrowed more in 2009. So I think that we recoup our money because we're looking at trying to figure out how we're going to do our budget here. That's it.
Thank you. Anything else?
None from staff, Madam Chair.
Comments from the city attorney or the city manager? Comments from the city attorney?
Nothing from me, Madam Chair. Thank you.
In that case, we are adjourned.
One last question. So tomorrow, all we have is health insurance?
No, sir. We have health insurance and then the department presentation. I believe there was an email. We got into the departments. I believe there was an email that was sent out this afternoon.
Okay.
Yes, for tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. You're adjourned. We're adjourned. You have a good night. Thank you.